Do do do. Hello, Alice. How you doing? Hope you're all well. Unfortunately, no, the cat won't be joining us today. She has been banished from my room, as of all my pics, apparently. Rule number one: when you have a studio in your own house, make sure your desk is tidy. You can find things. Wonderful. James is here. Yeah, the cat's been banished from my studio while I'm teaching because she has a habit of climbing up the back of my chair and sitting on my head, which, as funny as it would be, is slightly distracting. So I have to. Alice has been strumming to Zombie with the Tab. Oh, by the Cranberries, wonderful. I would very much like, if obviously with your parents' permission, to see a video of that maybe, because I believe the Music Works, what they're doing is sharing a student of the week or along those lines, maybe of the month. I'm not sure. And if you could play a song like that, that'd be really cool. So let's have a look. We've got James and we've got Alice. Okay. Cool. So luckily your groups not in the same group, right next to each other. So I've got that on my screen now. So let's jump straight into the reading rhythms. Okay, I want to look at that quickly because, in fact, no. First, thing I'm going to do is make sure you're in tune. Okay, because one thing that drives me. Yes, we have one. Four strings on a guitar. Yeah, that's not ideal unless you're C6 Steve. If you don't know who C6 Steve is, he is a guy who made a 3-string guitar out of a hubcap of a Morris Minor and proceeded to sell hundreds of thousands of records playing slide guitar. So maybe you could do that. Okay, I don't know. Right. So, we find this. Okay, reading. Make sure you're in tune, which is good. We have one. Let's. For James as well, obviously. I'll play each of the strings from 1 to 6 just so you can hear that you're in tune. Okay, so. Okay, so that seems to be in tune enough. Right, so reading rhythms, page 31. So with James's group, we've been looking at exercise 2. Alice's group, we've been doing exercise 1. So they're fairly similar. Exercise 2 is a little bit more tricky. The difficulty with these exercises increases as we go along. Some of the others, like we did on page 14, or with the chords, it tends to just be a different order. This page gets more difficult as we go on. So exercise 1, I'll go over that quickly. It's just, this is page 31, by the way, the Yamaha book. We've got the first bar, just 8 notes, okay? We've got 8 of them. Makes sense, right? We count that as follows: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? Has to be 8. So there's double the amount of notes, but the notes are half the length. Really important. Sometimes if you find it easier, you can actually write down the beats. Okay, let me see if I can find. I can't. Don't have a spare piece of paper. Again, this is why I need to make sure I tidy my desk. We can write down the names, or also the numbers or the symbols underneath to help us. Okay, I still do that now, which I should be out of that habit, but I still do. Okay, and that's allowed. Or if you develop your own method and it works for you, that's great. I'd like to hear about it as well. Tuning my guitar because it's a Les Paul that goes out of tune. I'll do. Cool. So, exercise on the first bar, we would play like this. So I'm just going to play A3. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And nice and easy. Now, the 16th note, that's where it becomes difficult. And I did write down in the lesson plan, and I also wrote down and explained it in the video. 16th notes, there's 16 in the bar this time, or we can have up to 16, but not always. But in this scenario, we do have the whole thing filled up 16th notes, so the 16 of them get double the amount that there is of 8th notes, but they're half the length again. We're going to count that 1, E, and Okay, don't ask me why someone chose E and It just, that's the way it is. I had to accept it. You should too. Okay, so first, one beat or one grouping of 16th notes of 4 would sound like this. 1, E, and okay? But what will always trip you up, and it still trips me up now, is if you're playing this exercise and you play the 8th notes and you're doing it without a metronome or a drum loop or something. If you play that first bar with 8th notes quite quickly, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, when you get to the 16th note, you've got to play double the speed. Okay, so if I started like this, the rest of it would be. I can do that because I've been playing for a long time, but you might not necessarily be able to do it yet. If you can, fantastic. I would like to see that, but make sure you start nice and slowly. I'll give you an example. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Okay? Now that would have been a good recap, James and Alice, that we're going for that. So what we're going to do now is, Alice, for you, this is going to be a bit of an insight to what you're going to get on Monday. Okay, we're going to do exercise 2. So I'm going to give you a head start now, as you're in this group and you're in the live stream. I mean, but this is going to help us. This is going to be a bit confusing because with this exercise 2, we're starting to put different note values together in the same exercise. So the first bar in exercise 2 is 4/8 notes, and then there's 2 quarter notes. So that first bar sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Okay, now it gets tricky because the next bar, the first beat, is 4/16 notes. Then we've got 2/8 notes, and then 4/16 notes, and then 2/8 notes. Once you get the rhythm or you feel of it, it's not too bad, but to start with, it could be quite difficult. So we've got this. I'll do the whole thing for you. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay. One more time, do it a bit slower. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay. Now, what I did there is play it wrong. Okay, that happens. Okay, you're allowed to make mistakes. I do it all the time. I'm a professional at making mistakes. Okay, I'm going to try that again. So 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. Okay, now again, right underneath with a pencil in the book if you need to, or you can copy it down onto a separate piece of paper. In fact, I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. Okay, now I don't necessarily need to do it for these rhythms, but if I'm learning a really complicated rhythm, like groupings of 5 and 6 or 7 or something silly, then I would need to do this. Okay, now I'm sure if you don't feel comfortable with writing in the book, you've got a piece of scrap paper like I do, or you can just find a piece of nice clean A4 paper. Okay, now I'm hopefully going to do this in a reasonable amount of time because unlike Blue Peter, here's not one I prepared earlier. If they even still have Blue Peter, I don't know. Either one of you could answer that question for me. And on the subject of questions, if any of you got any questions, then let me know because I am not psychic yet. Okay, I wish I was. That would make life so much easier. I'll win the lottery and everything. or if anyone's got something interesting that happened to them this week, which would be a funny anecdote to say, then let me know. Okay, now I'm nearly done. I promise, nearly done. Okay, so hopefully you can understand my hieroglyphics. Scrap piece of paper. You'll notice this is exercise 2. Page 31, reading rhythms, exercise 2, okay? Now what I've done is I've written it out, and underneath I've written the symbols that I need. So at the start I've got 1 and 2 and then 3, 4. Next bar, that's where we've got the 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 and, okay? As I said, my artistic skills aren't the best, okay? But hopefully that clears a couple of things up for you, because that still helps me now. Still does. And it's the same thing when we're doing chords. Okay, like this. A lot of people struggle with the G chord. Now, it's not too difficult. The challenge is, now this is one that Alice would have done this week, I believe. You have to have open 2 strings. So we've got open D and open G. And again, we need to make sure we use the tips of our fingers, curl our fingers over like this. I'm not going to let that slide. Hear this? So I've done it properly, okay? But it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It means that you just need to practice it some more, okay? Like that, nice. It wasn't a G chord, but it was a nice chord nonetheless. So, on the subject of things that I do still as a professional years after learning to play, is I'll play each string individually. And if I hear this kind of sound, so this is my A string, I'm not pressing it quite right. That could be because the fleshy part of my middle finger, because I'm not using the tip, is touching that string, stopping it from ringing out, or it could be I'm not pressing hard enough with my index finger. But eventually, if you play each string individually, you will figure out which one. I still do that. Like, there's a very difficult chord I was learning just last night, actually. If anyone's heard of Alan Holdsworth, I very much doubt you have. He had a chord that went like this. That doesn't sound particularly nice. You wouldn't hear Ed Sheeran using a chord like that. I like that chord. Personal preference and all that. Big stretch. So we've got 10 on the D string, 10 on the G string. Then we've got 14 with our ring finger on the B string and 16 with our pinky on the E string. Carl, you should try that one. It's from the song Road Games by Alan Holdsworth. Now that is really difficult, and it took me ages to get that down, and I still struggle to change to it and from it, but I practiced and I sat there for an embarrassingly long amount of time, and I worked really hard on that, okay? So I still write down the numbers and the symbols underneath my rhythm sometimes, and I still do each string individually with the chords, okay? Which you're allowed to do. You can do that. No one said, and no one's asked you to get it perfect first time. But I don't expect anyone to be able to do that. Okay. If there's any questions, we've got a minute left. Shoot them now, because I will leave after exactly 1 minute. Hope you do have some questions. I tend to ramble. Don't know if you've noticed. I'll play some waiting music while I wait for a question. questions then. In that case, I will see you all next week, and look out for your emails on Monday for your work in. Sounds like you're in a lift. That's the exact thing I was going for. I'm going to try and pitch that to a record company and get them to play my waiting music in a lift. No questions. Wonderful. In that case, see you all next week. Look after yourselves, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.